Camp, nuggets, and intel is what this show lives, eats, sleeps, and breathes on this time of year. And at Texas A&M, we talked to you a couple of weeks ago about how I thought the tight end room there was one of the more underrated in the country. Well, sophomore tight end Donovan Green has a torn ACL. That happened in the scrimmage the other day, so he's probably out for the year. 6'4", 235. He was the number 5 overall tight end in the 2022 cycle. Okay, so that's not catastrophic, but it's also not great, obviously. Jimbo Fisher, after this happened, he tried to ease concerns and say, I still like that room. He's not lying to you. He still does like that room. They got Max right there, more of the blocker. Jake Johnson was the number 1 tight end in the 2022 class. That's a guy who really gets bumped up the depth chart a little bit, and he was already going to be on the field. They'll lean on him a lot more. And so if you're trying to look for early guys that are probably under the radar as pivot points in offenses, not that they hurt for wideout talent there, but Jake Johnson's going to be an important player, I think, for them. For the record, you haven't heard me say quarterback competition, quarterback controversy, etc. with Texas A&M a single time this fall or summer, as it were. That's because Connor Wigman's taking all the first-team reps out there. That's not a surprise. Let's go to USC. So remember back in spring, USC couldn't even practice like they wanted to. Why? Because they didn't have defensive depth, and they certainly didn't have it last year. So do they have it this year? Well, it's not going to shock you to learn that folks close to the program keep telling us, hey, guys, I'm not kidding you, the defense looks a lot better. That's true, technically. It's also true that it was horrendous last year, so there was nowhere to go but up. But I don't want to knock what they're doing out there. So they did make some big moves in the portal, and I don't doubt that they'll probably be significant to quantum leaps improved statistically this year from the, 94th ranked points per game defense in FBS last year. Okay, but I want to know whomst, not just what, whomst is going to stand out this year. They got a linebacker, Tackett Curtis. It's a true freshman. Number 12 in the 2023 cycle at linebacker, 6'2", 225. When I talk to folks at USC, boom, that's the name. Tackett Curtis, Josh. You got to watch out for Tackett Curtis. Well, guess what I'm going to do, kids? I'm going to watch out for Tackett Curtis. And as you know, or I guess you should know by now if you've studied those helmet grids, USC's schedule is kind of backloaded. So the Trojans are a high-profile team. I don't think that you'll be talking about them week to week early in the year, but remember, there does come a time later in the year where they got every one of them, or virtually every one of those other more highly ranked odds teams out there in the Pac-12, and they got to play every single one of them, and it's depth that you got to be focused on, okay? It's preview magazine season. All of us get enamored with those first 22 names. And then what happens by week 6? You got red Sharpie all over the place because folks are either banged up or outright just out for the year. Well, Tackett Curtis is just a name to keep an eye on there. I need more than him. I need depth. It's just a name that keeps surfacing. Also, they're not hurting for wide receiver talent, but we keep on hearing about Zachariah Branch. That's a true freshman, 5-star receiver. Just keep an eye on him. Brennan Rice is out there. Singer they got from Arizona. Mario Williams, yes, he's still there. Loaded room. Doesn't mean an elite true freshman couldn't step up. At LSU, not so great news, really. So you know they are doing this thing down there where they're just trying to portal in a secondary, essentially. We talked about that a million times on the show. Here comes 1,000,001. But not in a good way. So Denver Harris has been a problem of sorts for them lately. It's not something I've spoken about on the show, but now everyone down there is talking about it, so I will too. Denver Harris had a pretty piss-poor attitude since he's been at LSU. That's not news to anyone who knew about Denver Harris at Texas A&M, because that's where he was last year. So Denver Harris has not been at practice the last couple of days. Denver Harris reportedly was pretty instrumental in one fight that happened the other day at practice, almost another one that happened afterwards. Denver Harris also not to be found anywhere in the team photo. I don't know what's going to happen with him. I think LSU has other players they're far more concerned about at this point than Denver Harris. Zy Alexander, Deuce Chestnut, those two dudes look good. So they got them out of the portal as well. I would, at this point, be a little surprised if Denver Harris is playing a major role in the LSU secondary this year. However, I got 2 stocks that are way up down there. This is not a surprise to an LSU fan, but if you're a Tennessee fan and you just want to know what's happening at LSU, Malik Neighbors, big-time talent last year, stock just continues to soar down in Baton Rouge. There's none to be found anywhere. If you do see some Malik Neighbors stock, snatch it up. And Mason Smith, I remember it like it was a year ago, because it was. They open against Florida State. Mason Smith, his former five-star guy on the defensive line. Everything about the expectation of how good the LSU defensive front could be is revolving around this 6'6", 315-pound guy in the middle, and then boom. He tears ligaments in his knee. He's out for the year. And I had a little sinking feeling for my LSU brethren in my heart, and then they just went and won the SEC West anyway. Well, this year they have him back. And the question is always, first off, is he back? And then secondly, does he have that explosiveness, that twitch, etc.? Sounds that way. There's also dudes like Harold Perkins already down there who didn't get hurt last year, so LSU is going to be really formidable up front. What about Florida State? Florida State, the blue chip ratio, not as kind to Florida State as it is to the other elite contenders out there, right? The blue chip ratio is just the overall ratio of former 4- and 5-star guys on your roster compared to guys who weren't former 4 or 5 stars. History says nobody below 50% in the blue chip ratio has ever won a national championship. Florida State's in the low to mid 40s. What do we talk about all the time on this show? Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it can't happen. Things happen for the first time all the time. And so Florida State's trying to be the first of the batch of maybe future teams that are able to break through that threshold. Well, if they're going to do it, we all know they have to do it with transfer talent. Here's where the good news pops in. Sounds like they hit on all of these transfers. So first off, they signed the number 6 transfer portal class. They signed 8 4-star kids in that class. Just some names we keep hearing about. Over at Knowles 24/7, they're doing a great job of chronicling and documenting all this. They got a couple of tight ends there. Jaheim Bell, for example. Kyle Morlock is another. Those two guys came in, and it's really interesting. All of a sudden, the versatility that gives you, the 2 tight end sets, the different multiplicity offensively. It's just a word I wanted to fit into the show tonight. Someone bet me $5 on it. The multiplicity people at the tight end position. Looks like Mike Norvell, at least on paper, has a lot of weapons at his disposal. It doesn't stop there. Braden Fisk, the defensive lineman, looks good. Keon Coleman, remember the wide receiver out of Michigan State? You know, when there was all that dust, all that smoke, I guess is a better word, around Michigan State. Is Peyton Thorne, the quarterback, going to leave? Is Keon Coleman going to leave? Yes. One of them went to Auburn. We'll talk about him in a little while. And the other one, the wide receiver, Keon Coleman, is down at Florida State. And I don't think it should surprise anyone who's watched him play. He's shining early in fall camp and looks to be an integral part of their offense and their passing attack. Fentrell Cypress at corner, I didn't even mention him, from Virginia. He's looked really good. So I cannot speak highly enough of how good they're talking about their transfers down there, which is a good thing because they have to have them come through if they're going to hit that over at 9.5 wins. Heavily juiced to the over. Didn't realize that. So a lot of folks loving them some Florida State right now. Do you love Ohio State? Where are you tonight? Where is the Ohio State quarterback battle as the sun sets here on August 15th? Well, Ryan Day, and I quote, says, "It's hard to name someone when there isn't a significant gap." Zoinks. And he also says heading into week 1 without a starter is not ideal. Now, that's an evergreen statement, but the first part is Ryan Day, I don't think BSing you. I just think there hasn't been a ton of separation. I have some disagreement there. I got a couple of different Buckeye group texts that I talked to my buddies in, and I'm obviously the outsider, and they follow every one of the 4 dozen websites that follow Ohio State day to day up there. So, you know, they claim to know more than me. However, when I listen to Ryan Day talk like that, when I listen to Kirby Smart down at Georgia talk about some of the depth issues they're dealing with, there's always this contingent of folks who think wink, wink, nod, nod, no, he's just saying that. And especially in the portal age, sometimes it is a valid retort to say, oh, he's just trying to present the idea there's a quarterback battle to keep both of them on campus, because one of them could hop in the portal any second. One of them could lose interest if he knows he's been bypassed. I'm not telling you that doesn't happen. I'm just not sure there is a slam dunk QB1 here, and Ryan Day's lying to me. I'm not sure that's the case. And I also don't think it's a death knell of any sorts for Ohio State. I mean, they're early in fall camp still. Like USC's already had their second scrimmage because they have a week 0 game. Ohio State's not that far in yet. But that's going to sort itself out. I have been of the opinion, and continue to be with Ohio State, that they can have pretty good quarterback play this year and win every game on their schedule. Can. not will, can. And the reason is because there's this collective galvanization, I think, that happens sometimes when you know you don't have a prolific quarterback. When you don't have a C.J. Stroud or a Bryce Young coming into the season, you know you got a guy that at best is going to be serviceable, pretty good. Won't lose us games, but he's not going to take over a game and win it. You know what that does to an offensive line and a running back room and a defensive back room? You know what that does to a defensive front that knows maybe we got to take over games? Maybe we got to Iowa our way to a win or two here and there. I think it pulls a little more out of them than otherwise would be pulled out of them. That's my opinion. We'll see if that's Ohio State this year. There is some other news, though. You remember post-spring, it looked like a really good team that was really suspect at offensive tackle. Well, they went out to San Diego State and got Josh Simmons. And they opened fall camp, and I came on air and said, 2 things you need to know. First off, this dude's running with the threes. And secondly, he won't be running with the threes for very long. I didn't have the speech impediment when I said it then. I do now. But Josh Simmons, voila, running with the ones at left tackle. He bumped the kid that was there to right tackle. And so that's important for obvious reasons because the left tackle position is premium in the sport of football. But think about your biggest competition up there. Think about Penn State and Michigan and the edge rush talent that both of those teams are going to employ against you. You can't be average at left tackle. You can be elite in a bunch of other places. If you've got a liability at left tackle, then you're 10-2 this year, maybe worse. And so you can either look at that one of 2 ways. You can say our hopes and dreams rest on a San Diego State transfer, or you can say I don't think we would have taken him if he wasn't quality. I would lean more towards the latter than the former. At Auburn, I sat here the other night, and I said, doesn't sound great. The quarterback situation does not sound promising. The returns don't sound sterling coming out of the Saturday scrimmage. I think everyone down there wants Pate Thorne to win the job. When I say everyone, I mean the coaching staff and really the head coach. And I just didn't hear that he had a great day. Well, I got some feedback, some good old-fashioned feedback. And the feedback was this. Most people close to the program still expect Pate Thorne to win the job. It's also a good thing they don't play this week. So those were little 2 bullet points that I got sent to me. I think that's probably where I tend to fall to. I think eventually Pate Thorne will be the guy who emerges. He just hasn't emerged yet. That's why God made 4 weeks of fall camp instead of 1.5 or 2. Somewhere in Genesis, but it's there. And so that's what's happening around college football. Again, we got a big week of scrimmages coming up. Saturday, coast to coast, they'll be scrimmaging, and that's when a whole lot of separation is going to happen. That's when quarterback rooms, that's when position battles get whittled down. You're not going past 2 weeks in fall camp and splitting reps 3 ways at some of these positions, and very rarely are you even splitting them 2 ways.